The wind had teeth that day. It bit through threadbare cotton and pulled at the edges of a world that had already unraveled. 3 figures moved slow across the scrubland. Children, though the oldest walked like someone twice her age. She didn't cry, didn't speak. The youngest whimpered now and then, no more than a weak flicker of noise lost in the wide mouth of the prairie. Her arms cradled the baby boy, slick with fever sweat, while the middle child, a boy of perhaps 8, trudged behind, silent as a shadow. They hadn't eaten since yesterday, or maybe the day before. Days blurred when time no longer mattered. Her feet were cracked, soles blackened with dust. Somewhere back down the trail, if you could call a scatter of hoof prints and sorrow a trail, was a cabin, burned out from lightning or hate. It didn't matter. Ma had died in that place 3 nights back. Fever, like the baby had now. The girl had buried her under a twisted mesquite tree, wrapping the body in the only blanket they had. She couldn't carry grief, and her siblings too. One had to stay in the dirt. The girl had no name worth saying. Ma used to hum something close to a name, soft and foreign sounding. But she'd never written it down, and the girl never asked how to spell it. Pa had disappeared half a year before, chasing railroad work east or whiskey west. Either way, he didn't send word. He didn't come back. So now the girl kept her mother's locket, empty inside, and the last splinter of pine Pa had whittled, with the start of a name carved halfway across its grain. She didn't know if that name was meant for her or the boy. A thundercloud watched them from the north like a hung judge. No, rain, not anymore, but the smell of it came anyway, thick, sharp, metallic. The girl raised her eyes. In the distance, a small cabin slumped beneath the dying sun. Its chimney leaned like it had given up. Still, it had walls. Shelter. She didn't ask her brother if he could make it. He would. Or he wouldn't. That was the way of things. The cabin greeted them with a groan when she pushed the door open. Dust thick on the floorboards. A rat skittered behind the hearth. She laid the baby on an old straw tick mattress and felt his brow, boiling. His breath rasped like coals in the throat of a stove. She pulled a jar from her satchel. Only water now. No herbs, no milk, no honey. The boy watched her. His eyes were dull, but locked on hers, like he was waiting for her to break. She didn't. That night, she lit a fire with a page torn from an old Bible nailed behind the cabin's door. The verse spoke of dust returning to dust. Fitting. The flames clung to it greedily, as if even the holy wanted to be forgotten. She fed the others what little she had, half a piece of jerky, a crust of cornbread she'd hidden in her skirt. She didn't eat. Hunger felt familiar, manageable. The ache in her belly was quieter than the scream in her heart. The wind outside shifted. Coyote song, long mournful howls, echoed across the hills. The boy flinched. The baby stirred and cried weakly. She gathered them close, wrapping her arms around their bodies, and began to hum. The melody came from memory, some lullaby Ma used to sing when the world was gentler. A tune without words, just soft vowels and the rhythm of a rocking chair. When she slept, she dreamed of her mother, pale and smiling, hands folded beneath wildflowers, lips moving but no sound. Then her eyes opened in the dream, and she reached out of the dirt, tried to hand the girl something, a word, maybe, but the wind took it. Always the wind. She woke before dawn. The fire was ash. Cold bit hard. Her arms were stiff, the baby burning up again. She dipped a cloth in the last of the water and laid it on his head. The brother sat by the door, carving at a bit of stick with a rock. His eyes were red. He hadn't slept. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. A noise cut through the stillness, a creak of leather, a snort of breath. The girl froze, then reached for her knife, dull and rusted, but steady in her grip. Through the thin gaps in the cabin's wood, she saw movement. A figure on horseback, broad-shouldered, long coat dusted in red earth, hat low. The sun had barely broken the horizon, and the man seemed like a ghost out of firelight. She rose, knife in hand, standing between the door and her siblings. The boy moved behind her, silent. Boots thudded softly on the porch boards. The door didn't open. Then a voice, low and calm, like smoke after rain. You look like you ain't from nowhere. She said nothing. Got kids in there? He asked. I ain't here to harm you. Still, she stayed silent. The knife trembled in her hand, just slightly. Storm's comin'. I can take you to shelter. If you want it. No answer. Just breath. Just dust. He stepped back. Didn't press. Just waited. The girl thought of Ma's grave, the empty locket, the baby's rasping breath. She looked at her brother, at his too thin arms, and the old grief in his eyes. She turned the knife in her palm once. Then she opened the door. Not all the way, but enough. The man didn't smile when she opened the door. He didn't reach for his gun, either, though one sat heavy at his hip. Dust clung to his coat, cracked to the seams, and his horse twitched beneath him, uneasy like it had smelled a storm long before one was due. You ride? He asked the girl, voice rough but not sharp. She didn't answer. She stepped back just far enough for him to see the boy and the baby. That was all the truth he needed. I got a place about 2 ridges over. You can rest there. Ain't much, but it's dry. Got food. Maybe medicine. Still, she said nothing. But the knife lowered. That was enough. He helped lift the baby first, gentle, careful like the child might be made of paper. Then the boy. Then her. She sat behind him, small hands clutching the saddle's back edge, not touching his coat. She watched the prairie crawl beneath them, the wind curling dust devils through the empty places, and wondered if this man was what people called safe or just the next kind of dangerous. His name was Elgin. That's all he offered. No questions. No explanation for the faint scar that curved beneath his eye or why his left boot creaked like it had been broken and mended too many times. They reached his homestead by late morning. A squat, wind-bitten ranch tucked against a rise of stone. 3 horses in the corral, a barn with a door half-hanging, and a cabin that looked old enough to remember wars. Still, there was smoke rising from the chimney. Life inside. Elgin dismounted, helped them down, and led them in. The air smelled of old tobacco and boiled beans. A rifle rested above the hearth. A saber, clean, oiled, out of place, hung on the wall beside it. A map of a country that didn't quite exist anymore lay on the table, covered in dust. You'll sleep there, he said, pointing to a cot in the corner. Wash basins outside. Water's from the well. Food'll come when I can get it warm. She laid the baby down and felt his forehead. Still hot, but the breath came easier. The boy sat on the floor, arms around his knees, eyes never leaving Elgin. Neither child spoke. Elgin moved quiet through his home, like someone who used to live among ghosts and didn't want to startle them back. He returned with bread, hard but warm, and a tin of beans. No grace said, no pleasantries. He watched them eat with the gaze of a man who wasn't used to company and didn't know what to do with it. Later, she found the boy by the barn, trying to climb the rail fence. Elgin stood nearby, arms crossed. "You ever been on a horse?" he asked her. She shook her head. Time he learned, then. The boy looked up, eyes wide, and for the first time in weeks, the girl saw something flicker behind his silence. Curiosity. Maybe even hope. Days passed slow. The baby's fever broke on the 3rd night, sweat soaking the cot as he whimpered into sleep. The girl cleaned him with one of Elgin's old shirts, cut into rags. The boy learned to brush the horses, feed the chickens, even laugh once, sharp and small, like he'd forgotten how. Elgin spoke little, but always watched. He mended fence lines by day and read worn books by candlelight at night. Sometimes he left for town, came back with flour, apples, coffee. Once, a pair of boots that fit the girl almost perfectly. "You'll need those come frost," he said, setting them by the door. Then, nothing more. But the silence began to shift. She noticed things. The way he flinched at the sound of gunshots echoing from beyond the ridge. The scars on his knuckles. The locked door near the back of the house. At night, she heard him whisper names in his sleep, names she didn't recognize. A woman's voice in his dreams, full of anger or sorrow, sometimes both. Once, she caught him holding a yellowed letter, fingers trembling. He burned it before dawn. In town, people stared. She heard whispers. Elgin's stray. Elgin's sin. Some said he used to wear a badge. Others swore he'd let a town burn to save his own skin. A drifter with too much past and not enough future. She didn't ask. Not because she didn't want to know, but because she understood that some names were too heavy to speak aloud. One evening, she sat by the fire, baby asleep beside her, the boy drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Elgin stood across the room, drinking coffee that looked more like mud. He stared at her a long time, then said, "You ever think of a name?" She blinked. "You got a first one, I reckon. But folks need a last. For the ledger, for the schoolhouse, for the grave, when it comes." She didn't answer. The boy looked up, waiting. Elgin set down his tin, walked over, kneeled. "I ain't much for fathering. Never was. But I've seen enough to know what survival looks like. And girl, whatever your name was, whatever your folks gave you, it didn't carry you this far. You did that." She watched him, unmoving. "So I'm giving you mine, if you'll take it." Still she didn't speak. He rose. "Think on it." The next morning, she found a pair of old riding gloves on her cot. A note tucked inside, written in a hard, neat hand. "A name's just a trail to follow. Yours can start here." She folded the paper, held it to her chest, and stepped outside into the rising sun. The wind smelled different now, less like endings, more like the start of something that might just hold. The sun rose hard and white over the hills, casting long shadows from the cottonwoods that lined Elgin's land. The girl, now taller and surer in her steps, walked the fence line with a coil of wire over her shoulder, the baby on her hip and the boy, still quiet, still watching, carrying a tin pail half filled with nails. The land had steadied beneath them over the months, like it was willing to give if they kept giving back. But something shifted that morning. The wind didn't carry its usual hush of dust and dry laughter. It brought hooves and questions. A man rode in from the east, silver star dull on his chest, mustache neat, coat too clean for this side of the prairie. He dismounted like he owned the dirt under his boots. "Marshal Ames," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I'm looking for Elgin." The girl didn't answer. Her hands closed around the wire tighter. The boy stepped behind her, silent. "I know he's here. Ain't trying to make trouble. Just want to talk." She kept her jaw locked. "I heard he's sheltering 3 orphans. Might be he's turned soft in his age. But soft don't wash away what a man's done." The marshal tipped his hat again and walked back to his horse without another word. But the message lingered like thunder before a storm. She found Elgin in the barn, sharpening a spade. His back was rigid, spine like coiled rope. "Marshal come by," she said. "I saw," he replied, not looking up. "What's he want?" Elgin paused. Set the spade down. "Old bones," he said. "Men like him ain't ever satisfied unless they're digging them up." She waited, but he didn't explain further. He never did. Every truth from him came slow, like he was afraid the land might swallow the words before they reached her. Later, she went to the locked room. It hadn't opened once in all the time they'd been there. She knew better than to press. But now the silence around it felt heavier than before, like something was waiting to be remembered. She picked the lock with a hairpin, hand steady. Inside, dust danced in the beam of sun that broke through a slat in the wall. A saddle hung from the ceiling, blood-stained and cracked. Beneath it, a trunk. Inside, a revolver wrapped in oilskin, a tin star, and a folded wanted poster. She opened it. The face was younger, beardless, eyes colder, but the name was his. A fugitive, or a lawman turned outlaw. Hard to say which. There was no bounty amount listed, just wanted dead or alive. She didn't tell him what she found. The next day, the boy came running from the creek, barefoot and breathless. "There's a grave," he said, "near the willow. Real shallow." She followed him. 3 stones arranged in a triangle, moss growing between them. She knelt, brushed dirt aside. The earth was disturbed, too fresh. A marker, maybe, but no name. That night, she dreamed the grave. In her sleep, the earth split open, and her mother stood inside it, holding out the locket. But when the girl reached for it, it turned to ash in her palm. She woke, sweating. In town, they spoke louder now. Whispers were gone. Accusations bloomed. One man spat near her feet and said, "Elgin's brought death with him before. He'll do it again." She walked away, head high, but her hands trembled the whole ride home. Elgin sat by the fire when she returned, reading a book he didn't really seem to be seeing. "You lied," she said. He didn't move. "You said we were safe here." "I said you could rest." "Ain't the same thing." She stepped closer. "Who was in that grave?" His jaw tensed. "Someone I failed." "You gonna fail us too?" He looked up then. The pain in his eyes didn't come from anger. It came from memory, from guilt etched deep into the bone. "I wasn't born to raise children," he said. "I was born to bury men. That's what I knew how to do. So why take us in?" Elgin looked at her then, really looked. "Because I was tired of losing things that mattered too late." She didn't reply. Not that night. 2 days later, the barn burned. The flames lit the sky red. Horses screamed in their stalls before Elgin, and the boy managed to wrench the doors open. No one saw who lit it, but everyone knew why. The marshal's visits had stirred the hornets. She stood in the ash the next morning, hands black with soot, face streaked with sweat. Elgin came to her, sleeves singed, skin blistered. "This won't stop," he said. "Not until I answer for what I was." She stared at him. "Then answer." But he shook his head. "Justice don't live out here. Just reckoning. And that don't always come clean." That night, she found the baby's locket and the pine shard from her father again. She sat in the doorway, watching the land, watching the sky, feeling everything start to tilt. She knew then, safety was an illusion. Elgin couldn't promise them peace. But he'd given them something better, a name to carry, and a fire to stand behind. She would fight for that, even if it meant fighting the truth. And she wasn't afraid to learn the truth anymore, not even if it broke her. The rain came like judgment. Dark clouds swallowed the ridgeline as thunder cracked open the sky. Mud clung to boot heels. The wind howled through broken shutters. And the girl stood at the edge of the porch with a baby pressed to her chest and a rifle leaning against the doorframe. She watched the marshal's men gather at the bottom of the hill. 3 riders, rifles slung low, waiting. They hadn't come to talk. Elgin stood behind her, revolver holstered, jaw tight, eyes drawn deep into the storm like he was searching for the part of himself he'd buried long ago. The boy crouched by the woodpile, sharp eyes on the slope, hands ready. He didn't speak. None of them did. They already knew what was coming. "They'll shoot first," Elgin said. "That's the kind of men they are." The girl turned to him, voice steady. "Then we don't wait." He looked at her like he'd never truly seen her before, not the skinny child from the prairie, not the scared girl with a rusted knife, but someone forged from hard miles and sleepless nights. Someone who had nothing left to lose but her name. And she wasn't going to give that up again. Ames called from below. "Elgin, you know why I'm here. Lay down your arms, and maybe I let the girl walk." The rain fell harder. Elgin didn't answer. He stepped off the porch slow, hands loose at his sides. The girl moved to stop him, but he raised a hand, quiet, firm. "This ends one way," he said. "But it ends my way." She didn't stay back. She followed him into the mud, her boots sinking with each step. She didn't carry her father's name, not anymore. She carried Elgin's. By choice. And names had weight. Ames rode forward, pistol already drawn. His eyes darted from Elgin to the girl. "You put kids in the line of fire now," the marshal sneered. "You came to our door," she said. Ames ignored her. "You think this girl redeems you, Elgin? Think she wipes clean what you did in Hollow Creek?" Elgin's voice came low, like thunder behind hills. "No, she doesn't redeem me. But she deserves to outlive what I did." The marshal's horse shifted beneath him. The riders flanked wide. "You going to draw a lawman?" Elgin asked. Ames smiled. "I'm not the law anymore. Just the cleanup." He raised his pistol. The girl didn't wait. Her rifle cracked once, clean. The marshal's shoulder snapped back as he dropped from his saddle, cursing. One of the riders turned to fire, but Elgin moved faster, his shot ringing out like a bell through the rain. A second rider slumped over, boot caught in the stirrup, body dragging. The third rider fled. Mud churned beneath hooves as Elgin dropped to one knee, breath ragged. The marshal lay in the dirt, groaning, blood mixing with rainwater. He wasn't dead, but he was finished. The girl stood over him, rifle lowered. "You're not going to hang him," she said. "And you're not taking our name." Ames coughed, spit pink. "You don't know what he is." "I know what he gave," she said. "You only came to take." Behind her, the boy held the baby tight, eyes wide but clear. He'd seen death, but he'd also seen a choice. They buried the dead beneath the willows, the same ones that hid the old grave. Elgin limped as he dug. He didn't ask for help, but the girl handed him the shovel anyway. Later, when the storm broke and stars peeked through a torn sky, they sat by the fire. The baby slept curled in a worn quilt. The boy carved letters into a piece of pine, real letters now, spelling out the name they all shared. Elgin looked at the girl. "You could leave. Start fresh. Take the others and ride until no one knows who I was." She shook her head. "Don't need to start over," she said. "We started already, and I aim to finish it here." His eyes filled with something close to peace. "You carry the name now," he said. "Make it mean something better than I ever did." She didn't promise him. She didn't have to. At dawn, she saddled the mare and rode into town alone. Folks stared, mouths tight, shoulders square. But no one stopped her. She walked into the sheriff's office and laid the marshal's badge on the desk. "He's done," she said. "And I'm not hiding anymore." The sheriff, old and tired, nodded once. "You got a name?" She paused, then said it, clear and true. The name Elgin gave her. The one she chose to keep. She rode home under a morning sky that didn't feel so wide anymore. The wind carried her name across the prairie, through broken fences and scattered ash, over shallow graves and rising grass. And for the first time, it felt like it belonged.